Voiceover is everywhere, and you hear it every day. From radio.
Number one for New Country 96.3 Hawkeye in the morning.
To TV.
My name is Lady Whistledown. You do not know me, but I know you.
To movies.
My name is Optimus Prime. Autobots, roll out.
To animation.
I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman.
And so much more.
I'm loving it.
Welcome to episode 12.
Welcome to Who Did That Voice, the show where we take an in-depth look at the world of voiceover, including movies, TV, animation, and more. And now, here's your host, Trenton Larkin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Who Did That Voice. I just wanted to take a moment and share a little bit about my interview with Ed Asner. This episode is different from past shows because between when Ed and I interviewed and this episode is airing today on September 3rd, 2021, Ed has sadly passed away. Ed and I did an interview on August 26th, and by Sunday morning, August 29th, my wife was hollering for me to hurry and come to where she was. She told me that Ed had just passed away, and I was in utter shock. And I couldn't believe it. It blew my mind. I had just chatted with him 3 days prior. Time with anyone is precious and fleeting, and I was absolutely honored to get the opportunity to chat with Ed Asner. Ed Asner was a very talented actor who starred in many different stage productions, TV shows, movies, cartoons, and more. He voiced many characters from cartoons that I loved growing up, but the character he was best known for was Lou Grant on the TV show The Mary Tyler Moore Show. He was the producer and later in the show the executive producer of WJM-TV. This show ran for 7 seasons over the course of September 19th, 1970 to September 25th, 1976. In the very first episode of the show, Mary Tyler Moore comes to WJM-TV to interview for a job and ends up speaking with Ed Asner's character, Lou Grant. Here are a few clips from that scene.
Do you have any idea when Mr. Grant will be back?
Hi, Mr. Grant.
You're back!
Hey, you live in my favorite neighborhood.
Oh, really? Well, I just moved in. Is it that nice?
Nice. Some of the best saloons in town are over there.
Yes, Mr. Grant, I will, but it does seem that you've been asking a lot of very personal questions that don't have a thing to do with my qualifications for this job.
You know what? You got spunk.
Well, yes.
I hate spunk. Tell you what, I'll try you out for a couple of weeks, see if it works out.
Oh.
If I don't like you, I'll fire you.
Right.
You don't like me? I'll fire you.
Yes. That certainly seems fair.
I grew up watching The Mary Tyler Moore Show, so these clips sure bring back some fond memories and loads of laughs. Ed's first animated role that caught my attention was from Spider-Man the Animated Series. In the cartoon, he voiced J. Jonah Jameson, the Daily Bugle's publisher and editor-in-chief. Both Spider-Man the Animated Series and X-Men the Animated Series were pivotal in my young life as they helped introduce me to the world of Marvel and its extended animated universe. Here are some clips from a scene with Spider-Man, J. Jonah Jameson, and Scorpion.
Uh-oh! What's that alarm? The Scorpion just activated the neutron-absorbing control rods behind that door.
How can we stop it?
The console. The red button. I'll bet my web shooter that's the emergency shutdown. Trust me, it's always the red button.
How do you know about stuff like this?
Hey, who do I look like? The Tick?
What were you up to? You heard the man. I've got to hit that red button, or the reactor will melt down, and the city will be destroyed by radiation. Who cares? Long as I get what I'm after.
What are you made of? Adamantium?
I'm gonna crush you now.
Oh, yeah? It just so happens I like to start each day with a warm hug.
You gotta be nuts, mister. Why would you risk your puny life to save his? Because you're a greater evil. And heaven help me, he's the only one who can stop you.
Huh? Did I hear right? J. Jonah Jameson's on my side?
Spider-Man the Animated Series has always held a super special place in my heart, and Ed was a huge reason this show and cast were so amazing. It was almost like a full-blown feature broken into smaller parts. The cast, crew, and scripts on this show were crafted in a way that animated shows today often fall short on. Ed was no stranger to voicing animated series or animated characters, and got the opportunity to voice Roland Daggett on Batman the Animated Series. He was the owner of Daggett Industries that helped to develop Renew You, a highly dangerous and addictive chemical that would eventually turn disfigured actor Matt Hagen into the villain known as Clayface.
Frankly, I think our Mr. Hagen has outlived his usefulness. I want him dealt with.
But Mr. Daggett, the man's a master of disguise. He was even before he had his accident, and you gave him this stuff.
Yeah, it's not easy finding somebody who can change the way he looks.
You needn't bother searching for him. This is the only place in the world where he can get what he needs. And when his supply runs out, he'll come to us.
Another amazing animated show that Ed was a part of was one unlike any other cartoon I think I have seen to this very day. The show was Gargoyles and was a unique, dark-toned, suspenseful, and often felt more like the animated version of Star Trek: The Next Generation. At least that's how I perceived it as a kid. Just check out the cast for yourself if you aren't sure what I mean. It has several prominent cast members from the sci-fi series, and it just brings a lot of smiles to my heart every time I see it. Ed voiced the wise gargoyle named Hudson. He was the older mentor, advisor, and warrior type gargoyle to Goliath, who was now the leader, and Hudson had previously been the clan leader before Goliath. This clip is a scene between Hudson and Goliath, the leader of the Manhattan clan.
Thank you for keeping me alive, Hudson. There's no one else I'd rather have at my side.
I'd forgotten that for a time. I thought my warrior days were over.
Nonsense. There are years of fighting left for you.
Now there's something to look forward to.
Gargoyles was a show that I absolutely enjoyed as a kid and still do to this very day. Another movie you may know Ed from is one of my all-time favorite Christmas movies. This movie is not an animated film, but it was a live-action movie called Elf from 2003, where Ed played Santa Claus. In this clip, we hear Buddy and Santa talking.
Santa! Buddy, is that you? Are you okay? Boy, am I glad to see you. The clausometer suddenly just dropped down to 0. There's just no Christmas spirit anymore. The strain was too much. The engine broke free of her mount. I need an elf's help.
I'm not an elf, Santa. I can't do anything right.
Buddy, you're more of an elf than anyone I ever met. And the only one who I would want working on my sleigh tonight.
Really?
Really? Will you fix it for me, buddy?
I'll try. Papa taught me how.
You gotta find it first. It dropped off the sleigh back over there a ways.
The engine.
The engine. Go, buddy. Go, Mr. Elf.
This movie always brings a smile to my heart and will do so more now than ever since I have had the opportunity to chat with Ed. I hope after this interview and tribute to Ed Asner, it will forever change your outlook on the works that Ed has done in his career. The ones we have talked about today are just a few of the many voices and characters he's played throughout his life, but this final movie we will talk about is an animated Pixar movie called Up, where Ed voiced Carl Fredricksen. Here is the final clip before we jump into the interview with the late and great Ed Asner.
Doug! Faster! Russell, over here! Let's go!
Mr. Fredricksen!
Come on, Kevin! Russell, get out of there! Leave them alone! Russell, hang on to Kevin! Don't let go of her! Kevin! Chocolate!
That was cool!
Don't check around so much, kid. Easy, Russell.
Oh, I am ready to not be a part.
Sorry about your house, Mr. Fredricksen.
You know, it's just a house.
Hey, Ed.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good.
Good. So, Ed, I read your book, Son of a Junkman, and it was absolutely brilliant. Your story is so chock full of history, and I really enjoyed getting to read all about you and to really kind of know a lot more about you than I initially knew. So, I'm really glad we're getting a chance to talk today about your autobiography and some of the amazing works you've done through your career.
Pleasure. Pleasure all mine.
So, Ed, I learned that, when you were in high school, you did journalism and radio, kind of focused on that in your junior and senior year, and even had your own show. And kind of what you did was produce your own productions and act in those. Well, I thought it was pretty amazing because I've always been fascinated with radio dramas and journalism and voiceover. So that was kind of what got me inspired to do this. So you were a big part of why I have a show. Because your characters like J. Jonah Jameson from Spider-Man and, Gargoyle's character Hudson and so many other amazing characters were huge inspirations for me. And I grew up watching the Mary Tyler Moore Show and reading your autobiography. I didn't even know that Lou Grant had his own show after, and I thought that was most fascinating.
You didn't know that?
I didn't know that. I grew up watching the Mary Tyler Moore Show, but I didn't know about the Lou Grant show. So,
school.
Yeah. I'll have to definitely watch it now that I've learned about it from the autobiography. But I was like, how amazing, and how you went from one comedy to one drama, and how even in the beginning, the critics were under the impression that it was a comedy and then learned later that it wasn't.
They're a little slow.
Yeah, they were a little slow. Absolutely. So with Mary Tyler Moore, for you, what was it like working on that show with Mary and the cast and crew?
It was died and went to heaven.
Died and went to heaven, huh? I know in your book you talked about it being like 7 years of heaven with friends and family because they became an extended part of your family. And it was amazing to learn about that, that it was such a great experience for you. And you really called it a once in a lifetime cast. Like there's no other show like ours. I thought that was pretty amazing.
Well, it was almost like a fascistic religion. We became such devotees of what we were doing, so proud and boastful of what we were doing. Nothing could stand in our way. No one could oppose it.
That's amazing. You say quite a few comical things. I found myself laughing throughout the entire autobiography. I think some of the stories you told about your dad, one of the most funny ones was when he went to an auction to buy a still from somebody who I guess the police had punctured holes in it, and your dad bought it for pennies, you said, and then it would turn around and resell it. And I'm like, what an ingenuitive man to, think of stuff like that, and to, have the scrap metal at his shop, with his junkyard, to be able to just repair it, resell it, and make more bucks than he bought it for, which your dad was a very resourceful guy. And it seems like you got that from him as well.
And when I repeated that story to him, that I had met this detective who mentioned that he had repaired and resold his still, he was highly insulted. My father. It's not like his youngest son. Hello, buddy. Hi, buddy. His youngest son learning about such things.
Yeah.
But to me, it was wonderful resourcefulness.
Absolutely. And I think it's amazing, growing up in that era, with your dad having a junkyard, there was World War I, there was World War II. So there were a lot of scrap drives and things for, resources that were trying to be gathered up for, manufacturing military things and homes and everything. So I'm sure your dad had a lot of points in his early career, especially that, his business was extremely booming because of just the economy and how it was going in history, how things were going and playing out.
Well, he came to our country as almost an illiterate teenager. I think he was 18 or 19 when he immigrated.
Yeah.
And the fact that he shouldered what he did to carry on and to start his dynasty shows great strength and resourcefulness on his part.
Absolutely. Yeah. Your dad was a man of vision. and definitely had an amazing legacy that you left, considering that it's still in operation, right? Your brother and his son-in-law are running it, correct?
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
It's now gone. So it's his son-in-law.
So it's son-in-law. Okay. And was that your brother Labe?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, I am sorry he passed a couple of years ago now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about that. But you said that was kind of the inspiration with his passing, was when you kind of finally said, I'm going to write my autobiography and tell my story.
Yeah, well, somebody had to do it. I was encouraged to do it by others.
Yeah.
Sam Joseph, a playwright I had done the work of before. And who else? Oh, and my lawyer. He wanted a piece of it.
He wanted a piece of it as well, huh?
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty amazing. I think to this day, you actually hold the most Emmy Awards for the categories that you've won in. So 7-time Emmy Award winner. And to this date, I believe you're the record holder at 7, from what I understand.
I'll take them and run with them.
So, Ed, when you were acting in the animation, I know sometimes you were saying that it wasn't necessarily the industry you felt the most interested in acting. You preferred more like doing stuff on Broadway or, stage productions. But, when you did the voiceover work, you really touched a lot of kids' lives like mine growing up. And when I was able to correlate that you were the voice of all these characters and then realize you were on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, it made it just that much more awesome for me, because I grew up watching the classics. My parents raised me on all those classic shows, Nick at Night, TV Land, all that kind of stuff that would show those reruns and everything. And when I realized you were also the voice of my childhood, it was pretty amazing to see how much you had done throughout the course of your life and how much it had impacted me growing up. So, Ed, one of the questions I like to ask is, tell us a little bit about Ed Asner, the young boy that grew into the man he is. You talk about it in your autobiography, but can you just share a little bit about your childhood and kind of growing up and becoming an actor?
Well, I was the youngest of 5. 2 boys and 2 girls preceded me. And up until 2nd grade, the beginning of 2nd grade, we lived above the junkyard, across the street from Armour's packing house. So all my childhood, I became quite well aware of the butchers and the bakers and the candlestick makers' blood, and hearing the moans of the cattle as they were being driven into the packing house. It was awe-inspiring, but at the same time, brutal. So we survived. We moved to a white bread village, I call it, City, Kansas, at the urging of my sister, who was a la-di-da lady. And we moved out of the junkyard and uptown at the beginning of the 2nd grade. And that was a world that I was in awe of. I just moved up the ladder and made National Honor Society, and that's the end of the story.
Well, I appreciate you sharing some about your childhood and kind of diving into that a little bit. When I was reading, I knew that you had been the president at one time of SAG, but you were the actual one who spawned the SAG-AFTRA combo merger, right?
No, that took place after my presidency.
Okay, that was after your presidency, but you were kind of the one that ran on that platform and kind of got the ball rolling, at least for that to probably happen then.
It was not what I wanted.
Oh, it's not what you wanted.
It's not the kind of merger that I was seeking.
Okay.
I still say that's my feelings about it.
Okay.
The problems were not solved.
So the merger, the reasons your merger and concept was the platform you were running on, the concept for the merger was different than what it ended up becoming then.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know that. Okay. Well, that's very fascinating. Well, I know there was a lot of political stuff going on during that time in your presidency that, kind of caused some.
Always be political stuff.
Right. Well, I mean, just specifically during your presidency that, kind of made things a struggle for you in your life, caused some blacklisting in Hollywood. But after years of struggle, you were able to come back. And I think you said your real comeback was in Elf when you got to play Santa Claus in 2003.
Yeah, and following that up with Up in what, 2009?
Yeah, I just watched it this morning again just to refresh myself, along with an episode of Batman the Animated Series where you played Ronald Daggett.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so you played an amazing character in Carl Fredricksen. My wife and I have kind of a similar story. We've had infertility issues and struggled with that kind of stuff, so it's got a real special place in my heart. And you portray Carl so excellently, and your training and your acting history from the stage, it just comes through so well in your animated characters because you're so professionally trained and such a professional in everything you do.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. Well, Ed, one of the questions I always like to ask my actors when they're on the show is what advice would they give to young actors? And you actually have said some advice in your book on page 92. It said, if I could give one piece of advice to all young actors out there, it would be to be true to yourself. Before you become an actor, know who you want to be in life and stick with it. Fame can do a lot of things to you, but if you were true to yourself, you will never look back at your life with shame. I think that's amazing advice. It's one of the most solid pieces I've actually heard from an actor. And I love that. I really do.
Well, I'm proud to hear you say that, and I'm proud to say that I still believe it.
I'm glad you do, because, being true to yourself really is the most important thing in this world. And if you can't be true to yourself, what's the point?
That's exactly. What is true to yourself? What does true to yourself mean?
True.
It means that I don't like fascists. I can appreciate their strength of soul, if they could call them having one. But at the same time, there are limits to strength. There are times when you say, that's too heavy, that's too much.
Yeah.
You retire from the field of combat and say, let somebody else carry it.
Absolutely.
Oh, share the load.
Absolutely.
Way to look at it, I think. Share the load.
I love that. Speaking of combat and sharing things, you actually did serve in the Army. Is that correct? During the Korean conflict? And you were part of Signal Corps?
During Korea, and they sent me to France.
And you were the leader of the basketball team for the United States there, correct?
No, I don't know about leader, but I was a strong encourager.
Strong encourager. Okay. Well, that was a fascinating story. I didn't know that you had served our country, but thank you for your service and thank you for the amazing works you've left behind throughout your career. You are an amazing actor. And, sometimes the whole reason the show is called Who Did That Voice is because, you want to know who's behind the voices of these characters that you grow up loving. And then when you start connecting the dots, you're like, holy cow, Ed has been all of these characters I love. So Ed, in closing here, what is the legacy that you think you will leave behind?
Work is the ethic.
Work is the ethic. I love it.
More important than anything else.
More important than anything else.
Yeah, it's the devil's handmaidens, the hands, from playing with yourself. And if you're working, you're too busy to concentrate on evil.
I like that. I absolutely love that. That's a fantastic legacy that you want to leave behind, Ed. I can't thank you enough for the time we've had today. I was really appreciative to get this opportunity to speak with you. You're a man that's meant a lot to me throughout my life, even when I didn't know who the man was behind the voice until I learned that. But throughout my life, throughout my childhood and into my adult years, you have continued to bring me laughs. I think the scene with you and Mary, when you're interviewing her, was hilarious. You're like, do you want a drink? She's like, yeah. And she's like, I'll take like whatever, Tom Collins, whatever. And you're looking at her like, I've got whiskey in the door, lady. That's it. And you're like, how about just a cup of coffee? Stuff like that just your deadpan humor. It cracks me up to my core and brings such smiles and laughter and joy. And it continues to do that for me and others, and it will for generations to come. So thank you so much, Ed, for everything you've done.
Yeah, you run a good show. I like it.
I appreciate it, Ed. I really do. Well, Ed, it has been an absolute honor and pleasure having you on the show today. Would you please give us a closeout as Carl Fredricksen from Up?
Well, I would just be myself. I would be the same guy that you've been talking to for the last half hour. I would say to you that whatever you think is game by me. Who did that voice? Well, I've done the voices, and I must say I'm sorry that a lot of the people who used to hire me for the voices aren't even in the business anymore. That's Carl Fredricksen launching a complaint. This has been Ed Asner on Who Did That Voice? Who is that voice? Where did that voice come from? We'll track him down and obliterate him. Naming the voices that we've all been regaled with, figuring out just who are they.
I love it, Ed. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
You're glad to be with. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I sure hope you enjoyed today's episode of Who Did That Voice? And if you did, please find us on all social media under Who Did That Voice, on YouTube at Who Did That Voice 24, and on all podcasting platforms under Who Did That Voice. I really hope you enjoyed today's special episode, and we'll see you next time. Thank you to all my listeners out there. I just wanted to say, if you want to partner with Who Did That Voice, just telling your friends and family about us is the best way to share the show with others, and or leaving us a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcast from. The third and final way is by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/Who Did That Voice.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time for more discoveries on Who Did That Voice.